In the annals of automotive history, few names command recognition like Volkswagen. Yet, beneath its polished image of German engineering and global dominance lies a past fraught with controversy, ambition, and untold truth. To understand the depths of its story, we must begin at its inception, a tale deeply interwoven with Germany's tumultuous early 20th century. Chapter 1. A Vision Born in Shadows. The year was 1933. Germany, reeling from the economic and social devastation of World War I, had plunged into political turmoil. It was in this volatile environment that Adolf Hitler rose to power, proclaiming grand visions for the nation. Among his aspirations was a project aimed at mobilizing the German populace, a car for the people, a Volkswagen. This dream would soon materialize, but not without its dark beginnings. The man at the helm of this automotive vision was Ferdinand Porsche, a gifted engineer born in 1875 in Bratislava, then part of Austria-Hungary. Porsche's brilliance in engineering had already earned him accolades. He was instrumental in designing race cars and tanks, but his ambitions were far greater. By the early 1930s, Porsche envisioned creating an affordable, reliable car for the masses, a concept virtually unheard of at the time. Porsche's ideas aligned with Hitler's broader goal, to create a car that could be owned by every German family. The regime sought to unify the nation under symbols of progress, and what better way to do so than with a car that embodied accessibility and modernity? With government backing, Porsche was tasked with turning this vision into reality. Chapter 2. The Birth of the Beetle. By 1934, Porsche had developed a prototype for what would later become the Volkswagen Beetle, a car with a distinctive rounded shape and rear-mounted engine. Its design was simple, efficient, and durable, qualities intended to make it the ideal people's car. However, the project faced challenges from the outset. German automakers dismissed the idea, claiming that it was financially and technically unfeasible. Undeterred, Porsche pushed forward, buoyed by the unrelenting support of the Nazi regime. The German Labor Front, a state-controlled union organization, funded the construction of a massive factory in Wolfsburg to produce the car. Workers were promised ownership of the vehicle through a savings scheme, requiring them to pay weekly installments. Yet, as the years passed, not a single car was delivered to these hopeful families. Instead, the factory shifted gears toward producing military vehicles as Germany prepared for war. The Beetle's inception, far from being a triumph of innovation for the masses, became a cog in the Nazi war machine. The factory's labor force included thousands of forced laborers, prisoners of war, and concentration camp inmates. Their suffering and exploitation were integral to the early operations of Volkswagen, an indelible stain on the company's legacy. Chapter 3. War and Survival. As World War II raged, the Volkswagen factory churned out vehicles for the German army, including the Kübelwagen and Schwimmwagen, utility vehicles designed for military use. Meanwhile, the grand promise of the people's car faded into obscurity, replaced by wartime demands and an increasingly brutal regime. The factory's reliance on forced labor reached horrific levels. Historical records estimate that over 15,000 workers toiled under appalling conditions in Wolfsburg. Malnourished and abused, many perished within the factory's walls. This period marked a dark chapter not only for Volkswagen, but for industrial complicity in wartime atrocities. By 1945, as the Allied forces advanced into Germany, the Wolfsburg plant was left in ruins, a testament to the regime's failed ambitions. With the collapse of the Third Reich, Volkswagen's future hung by a thread. Its association with the Nazi regime and the moral weight of its actions during the war seemed insurmountable. Chapter 4. From Rubble to Revival. Post-war Germany faced immense challenges, not least of which was rebuilding its shattered industries. For Volkswagen, survival seemed unlikely. The Wolfsburg factory was occupied by British forces, who considered dismantling it entirely. However, Major Ivan Hurst, a British Army officer with a background in engineering, saw potential in the plant. Under his guidance, production of the Beetle resumed, not as a Nazi propaganda tool, but as a practical solution for a Europe desperate for affordable transportation. The early post-war years were fraught with difficulty. The factory's workforce, demoralized and working amidst the ruins, struggled to meet production demands. Yet the Beetle's reliability and simplicity began to win over customers. What started as a trickle of orders turned into a wave as Volkswagen found its footing in the emerging German economy. Chapter 5. The stage is set. By the late 1940s, Volkswagen had transitioned from its controversial origins into a symbol of Germany's post-war recovery. The Beetle, once a project steeped in propaganda and exploitation, began to take on new meaning as a car that could transcend its dark past. But even as Volkswagen's image evolved, the scars of its history remained. Questions lingered about its accountability for wartime actions, the exploitation of forced labor, and its relationship with the Nazi regime. These questions, often pushed aside in favor of celebrating its post-war success, would resurface in later years, demanding answers. The years following World War II marked a turning point for Volkswagen. From the ashes of a shattered Wolfsburg, the company began to reforge its identity. This was a period of reinvention, marked by remarkable achievements, bold expansion, and simmering controversies. Yet, as Volkswagen grew into a global powerhouse, its dark past continued to cast a shadow over its ascent. Chapter 1. The British Stewardship and a New Beginning. When British forces seized the Wolfsburg factory in 1945, they were met with a plant in disarray. Bombed-out buildings, missing machinery, and a decimated workforce painted a bleak picture. Initial plans by the Allies included dismantling the factory and redistributing its equipment as war reparations. Yet Major Ivan Hurst, a pragmatic British officer with an engineering background, saw potential in Volkswagen's remnants. Under Hurst's leadership, the factory resumed production of the Volkswagen Beetle, which was initially designed to fulfill the Nazis' people's car promise. The British military placed orders for thousands of Beetles to serve as utility vehicles for occupying forces. This pragmatic move saved the factory from closure and preserved thousands of jobs in the region. By 1949, as West Germany transitioned toward self-governance, the British handed over control of Volkswagen to the German government. The company was restructured as a public entity, with its operations overseen by the West German state of Lower Saxony, which remains a major stakeholder to this day. Chapter 2. The Beetle as a symbol of resilience. During the 1950s, the Beetle, officially known as the Volkswagen Type 1, became the heart of Volkswagen's resurgence. It was simple, reliable, and affordable, a stark contrast to the luxury vehicles of the pre-war era. At a time when post-war Europe needed inexpensive and efficient transportation, the Beetle became a beacon of mobility and independence. Volkswagen's marketing efforts played a pivotal role in the car's success. The company focused on reliability and practicality, appealing to middle-class families and first-time car buyers. Production soared as demand increased, first in Germany and then in neighboring countries. The Beetle's success wasn't just confined to Europe. Volkswagen began exporting to the United States in 1949, initially facing resistance from American consumers accustomed to larger, more powerful cars. However, clever marketing campaigns in the 1960s, led by the iconic Think Small advertisements, transformed the Beetle into a symbol of counterculture and individuality. It became a global icon, with sales crossing the 1 million mark by 1955 and continuing to grow exponentially. Chapter 3. Expansion and Innovation. Flush with success from the Beetle, Volkswagen expanded aggressively in the 1950s and 1960s. The company diversified its lineup with models like the Transporter, the iconic VW van, and the Karmann Ghia, a sleek coupe that blended affordability with style. These vehicles cemented Volkswagen's reputation as a manufacturer of reliable and versatile cars. Volkswagen also began expanding its manufacturing footprint. Factories were established in Brazil, Mexico, and South Africa, marking the company's foray into global production. This strategy not only reduced costs, but also allowed Volkswagen to penetrate emerging markets. By the 1960s, Volkswagen was no longer just a German automaker. It was a global brand with a presence on every continent. However, these years of expansion were not without their challenges. The company faced mounting criticism for its use of forced labor during the war, which had yet to be fully addressed. Survivors and human rights groups demanded restitution, forcing Volkswagen to confront its past even as it looked toward the future. Chapter 4. The shadows of a dark past. While Volkswagen was enjoying international success, its wartime history continued to resurface. The company had relied heavily on forced labor during World War II, employing prisoners of war, concentration camp inmates, and civilians from occupied territories. For decades, Volkswagen remained silent about this chapter, evading accountability. It wasn't until the 1980s and 1990s, long after the company had become a global titan, that Volkswagen began to address these dark chapters. Under pressure from historians, activists, and the media, the company commissioned independent investigations into its wartime activities. The findings were damning, revealing the extent of forced labor and human suffering tied to Volkswagen's early success. In 1998, Volkswagen established a compensation fund for survivors of forced labor. While this move was widely seen as overdue, it marked an important step toward reckoning with its past. Yet, critics argued that no financial restitution could erase the suffering endured by thousands of victims. Chapter 5: The Road to a Modern Identity. As Volkswagen navigated its post-war challenges, the company began positioning itself as a forward-thinking innovator. In the 1970s, the global automotive landscape shifted, with rising oil prices and changing consumer preferences. The Beetle, once the cornerstone of Volkswagen's success, was increasingly viewed as outdated. Sales declined, forcing the company to adapt or risk obsolescence. Volkswagen's response came in the form of the Golf, known as the Rabbit in some markets, introduced in 1974. This compact front-wheel drive car marked a radical departure from the rear-engine, air-cooled design of the Beetle. Designed by Giorgetto Giugiaro, the Golf quickly became a bestseller, revitalizing Volkswagen's fortunes and solidifying its place in the modern automotive market. The Golf's success signaled Volkswagen's ability to innovate and adapt. Over the following decades, the company introduced a slew of new models, expanded into luxury vehicles through the acquisition of Audi, and entered high-performance markets with brands like Porsche and Lamborghini under its umbrella. Volkswagen was no longer just the maker of a people's car, it was a diversified automotive empire. Chapter 6: A Rising Controversy. As Volkswagen grew, so too did its ambitions. By the late 20th century, the company had become one of the world's largest automakers, competing with giants like Toyota and General Motors. However, its rise was not without ethical dilemmas. Labor issues resurfaced, this time in the context of its global operations. Accusations of exploitative practices in developing countries, environmental negligence, and corporate mismanagement began to emerge. In South Africa, for instance, Volkswagen faced allegations of collaborating with the apartheid regime to suppress workers' rights. Similarly, environmentalists criticized the company for its slow adoption of eco-friendly technologies in the face of rising global concerns about climate change. These controversies painted a picture of a company willing to prioritize profit over principle, a pattern that would later erupt into one of the largest scandals in automotive history. Chapter 7: Foundations of a Global Giant. By the end of the 20th century, Volkswagen had cemented its place as a leader in the automotive world. It had overcome its association with Nazi Germany, reinvented itself through innovation, and expanded its influence across the globe. The Beetle, once a symbol of wartime propaganda, had been reborn as an icon of the 1960s counterculture and a testament to resilience. However, as Volkswagen entered the 21st century, it faced a new set of challenges. Global competition was fiercer than ever, and the company's growing ambitions would lead it down paths fraught with ethical and legal peril. As the 21st century dawned, Volkswagen was no longer just a car manufacturer. It was an empire. Having survived the challenges of its early days and capitalized on the success of models like the Beetle and Golf, Volkswagen set its sights on becoming the world's largest automaker. However, as the company grew, so did the complexity of its operations, the scope of its ambitions, and the weight of its controversies. Chapter 1: The Path to Global Dominance. By the 2000s, Volkswagen had diversified its portfolio significantly. It owned an array of brands, ranging from the affordable Skoda and Seat to the luxury Audi and Bentley, and even high-performance giants like Porsche, Lamborghini, and Bugatti. Each acquisition served a strategic purpose, expanding Volkswagen's footprint across various market segments and solidifying its status as a global titan. The company's strategy was aggressive. Volkswagen aimed to surpass rivals like Toyota and General Motors by becoming the world's largest automaker. Under the leadership of CEO Martin Winterkorn, appointed in 2007, this ambition crystallized into a bold plan to achieve 10 million vehicle sales annually by 2018. Winterkorn's tenure was marked by an emphasis on innovation, precision engineering, and rapid market penetration, particularly in China, the world's fastest-growing automotive market. China became Volkswagen's crown jewel, contributing to a significant portion of its revenue. The company was one of the first foreign automakers to establish a strong foothold there, a move that gave it a head start over competitors. Its investments in local partnerships and manufacturing plants paid off, making Volkswagen the top-selling brand in China. Chapter 2. Technological Triumphs and Environmental Promises. As environmental concerns grew globally, automakers faced pressure to reduce emissions and adopt sustainable practices. Volkswagen positioned itself as a leader in this shift. The company pledged to produce cleaner, more fuel-efficient cars, emphasizing its commitment to environmental stewardship. The introduction of Blue Motion technology in Volkswagen vehicles was touted as a step toward this greener future. The system claimed to reduce fuel consumption and lower emissions, aligning with tightening global regulations. Similarly, Volkswagen announced ambitious plans to transition toward electric vehicles, unveiling models like the e-Golf and committing to a full electrification strategy by 2025. These promises bolstered Volkswagen's image as an innovative and socially responsible company. It appeared to be leading the charge into a sustainable future, earning praise from environmentalists and regulators alike. Chapter 3. The Dieselgate Scandal. Beneath this shiny exterior, however, lay a devastating secret that would shake the automotive industry to its core. In 2015, the United States Environmental Protection Agency, EPA, exposed Volkswagen for installing defeat devices in its diesel vehicles. These devices were sophisticated software programs designed to cheat emissions tests, making cars appear far cleaner than they actually were. The scale of the deception was staggering. Volkswagen had installed these devices in approximately 11 million vehicles worldwide, allowing them to emit nitrogen oxide levels up to 40 times the legal limit. For years, Volkswagen had marketed its diesel vehicles as environmentally friendly, a claim now revealed to be a calculated lie. The fallout was swift and severe. Volkswagen faced billions of dollars in fines, lawsuits, and vehicle recalls. Its reputation, painstakingly rebuilt over decades, was in tatters. The scandal exposed a culture of corporate dishonesty, with investigations uncovering that top executives had been aware of the deceit and had actively participated in its cover-up. The scandal, known as Dieselgate, became one of the largest corporate frauds in history. It not only highlighted Volkswagen's willingness to prioritize profits over ethics, but also cast doubt on the broader automotive industry's claims of environmental responsibility. Chapter 4. Leadership in Crisis. The Dieselgate scandal triggered a leadership crisis within Volkswagen. Martin Winterkorn resigned as CEO amid mounting evidence that he had been aware of the emissions fraud. His departure marked the beginning of a series of shakeups at the company's highest levels, as investigators sought to hold executives accountable for their role in the scandal. Volkswagen's new leadership, led by CEO Matthias Müller, pledged transparency and reform. The company embarked on a massive restructuring effort, allocating billions of euros to settle legal claims, compensate customers, and invest in electric vehicle technology. Müller characterized this period as one of reckoning and redemption, vowing to restore trust in the Volkswagen brand. Yet the damage was done. Dieselgate had not only eroded consumer confidence, but also attracted scrutiny from regulators around the globe. The scandal revealed systemic failures within Volkswagen, from a lax oversight to a toxic corporate culture that prioritized short-term gains over long-term integrity. Chapter 5. Reinventing the Future. Despite the immense challenges posed by Dieselgate, Volkswagen sought to turn the crisis into an opportunity. The company doubled down on its commitment to electric vehicles, EVs, announcing plans to become a global leader in electrification. The launch of its ID series, a line of fully electric vehicles, signaled a dramatic shift in strategy. Volkswagen also made significant investments in battery technology, autonomous driving, and digital services, aiming to redefine itself as a tech-driven mobility company. The transformation was part of a broader industry trend as automakers raced to adapt to the changing landscape of transportation. This pivot towards sustainability and innovation was not without challenges. The transition to EVs required massive capital investment, and Volkswagen faced stiff competition from established players like Tesla and emerging rivals in China. Yet, the company's scale, resources, and engineering expertise positioned it as a formidable contender in the electric revolution. Chapter 6: Balancing Legacy and Progress. Even as Volkswagen forged ahead, it grappled with the weight of its legacy. The Dieselgate scandal remained a defining moment, serving as a cautionary tale of corporate hubris and the consequences of ethical lapses. The company's wartime history, once buried in silence, continued to resurface, reminding the world of the darker chapters in its past. Efforts to reconcile these issues have been mixed. While Volkswagen has made strides in addressing its historical wrongs and implementing stricter governance measures, critics argue that deeper cultural changes are needed to prevent future scandals. The company's relentless pursuit of growth, while impressive, has often come at the expense of ethical considerations, a pattern it must break to secure its future. Chapter 7: A household name with global influence. Despite its challenges, Volkswagen remains one of the most recognizable brands in the world. Its vehicles, from the iconic Beetle to the cutting-edge ID.4, continue to shape the automotive landscape. The company's ability to innovate and adapt has ensured its survival, even in the face of seemingly insurmountable odds. Yet, Volkswagen's story is far from over. The journey from a people's car to a global powerhouse has been marked by triumphs and betrayals, innovation, and scandal. As it moves forward, the company must navigate the delicate balance between profit, responsibility, and legacy. By the mid-2020s, Volkswagen had begun to emerge from the shadows of the Dieselgate scandal, having made significant strides toward re-establishing its reputation as a leader in the global automotive industry. Yet, despite the company's commitment to redemption, the legacy of its past, both the horrors of its involvement in Nazi-era forced labor and the dishonesty exposed in the Dieselgate scandal, continues to haunt it. Now, as Volkswagen pivots toward a future driven by sustainability and technology, its story serves as a cautionary tale of corporate hubris, the pursuit of global dominance at any cost, and the long road to atonement. Chapter 1: Rebuilding after the fallout. The years following the Dieselgate scandal were a time of reckoning for Volkswagen. The company faced an unprecedented financial and reputational crisis, but through massive restructuring, compensation plans, and a renewed focus on transparency, Volkswagen began the slow, painful process of rebuilding. The financial cost of the scandal was staggering. By 2021, the company had paid over $30 billion in fines, legal settlements, and recall costs in the United States alone. In addition, millions of affected vehicles had to be fixed, sold back to the company, or taken off the road entirely. Volkswagen faced class action lawsuits in several countries, its public trust shattered, and its brand tarnished. However, Volkswagen's leadership remained steadfast in its resolve to make amends. CEO Herbert Diess, who took over from Matthias Müller in 2018, spearheaded a new era of corporate reform. Diess initiated sweeping changes within the company, focusing on creating a more transparent, accountable, and ethically minded organization. To ensure that such a scandal never happened again, Volkswagen put into place stricter internal controls, restructured its board to include more independent oversight, and implemented an ethics program aimed at strengthening corporate governance. Despite these efforts, the road to redemption was not without setbacks. Skeptics questioned whether Volkswagen was truly committed to changing its ways or if it was simply trying to move past the scandal for financial gain. Many wondered whether the company would ever regain the trust it had lost in the eyes of both consumers and regulators. Chapter 2: A shift toward electric mobility. As part of its recovery plan, Volkswagen embraced a bold new vision for the future, one that focused on electric mobility and sustainable practices. In the wake of Dieselgate, the company's leadership recognized that its future could not rest on fossil fuels and diesel engines. The growing global demand for clean energy, combined with stricter emissions regulations in Europe and North America, made it clear that the automotive world was heading toward electrification. In 2015, the company unveiled its Together Strategy 2025 plan, which outlined its intention to become the world leader in electric mobility by 2025. This ambitious initiative included a major investment in electric vehicle EV technology, with plans to launch a full range of electric cars under the ID sub-brand, starting with the ID.3. Volkswagen also invested billions in building a global network of fast-charging stations, which would enable customers to more easily adopt electric vehicles. Volkswagen's push into electric mobility was not limited to passenger vehicles. The company also focused on electrifying its commercial vehicles and buses. In 2017, it introduced the electric version of its transporter van, known as the ID. Buzz, a modern reimagining of the iconic Volkswagen bus that had become a symbol of the 1960s counterculture. With this move, Volkswagen aimed to become a driving force in the transformation of urban mobility. Volkswagen's electric vehicles received positive reviews for their performance, design, and range, and sales of its ID models began to gain momentum. The company's efforts to reduce its carbon footprint and embrace a sustainable future were met with support from environmental groups and policymakers. Despite challenges such as supply chain disruptions, the rising cost of raw materials for batteries, and intense competition from the likes of Tesla, Volkswagen's commitment to its electric future remained unwavering. By 2023, the company announced that it had reached its target of producing over 1 million electric vehicles globally, a major milestone in its goal to electrify its entire fleet by 2030. Chapter 3. Corporate Culture. Reformed? One of the most important questions surrounding Volkswagen's journey of redemption is whether the company's internal culture had truly changed. Was the scandal merely the result of a few rogue individuals, or did it reflect a deeper, more systemic issue within the organization? Following Dieselgate, Volkswagen's leadership made concerted efforts to overhaul its corporate culture. New training programs, a revised code of ethics, and greater transparency were all part of the company's attempt to foster a more ethical workplace environment. In addition, the company began to emphasize greater corporate responsibility, focusing not only on profitability, but also on environmental sustainability and social impact. However, skepticism remained. The scale of the deception behind Dieselgate suggested a culture of complacency, one in which executives were willing to risk everything, including the company's future, to achieve market dominance. Critics argued that Volkswagen's rise to power had always been built on a foundation of aggressive and sometimes unethical business practices. The scandal, many said, was the logical culmination of a corporate mentality that valued success at all costs, regardless of the ethical implications. Despite these criticisms, Volkswagen made significant strides in rebuilding its corporate image. The company improved its communication with consumers, built stronger relationships with environmental organizations, and worked to gain the trust of governments and regulatory bodies. But the question of whether this transformation was genuine or merely a superficial response to crisis remains unanswered. Chapter 4. The Role of Politics and Social Responsibility. As Volkswagen moved forward, it also increasingly found itself entangled in the broader social and political dynamics of the global automotive industry. Volkswagen's role as a major player in the German economy and its significant influence on the world stage meant that the company had a responsibility to engage with social issues beyond simply producing cars. The company faced mounting pressure from various stakeholders, including governments, investors, and consumers, to step up its environmental and social responsibility efforts. Climate change became an ever-pressing issue, and companies like Volkswagen were expected to lead the way in reducing carbon emissions and shifting toward greener energy sources. Volkswagen's commitment to sustainability was evident in its growing investments in renewable energy, energy-efficient manufacturing practices, and carbon-neutral mobility solutions. The company's powertrain division, for example, shifted its focus from traditional internal combustion engines to electric and hydrogen fuel cells, which it sees as the future of clean transportation. However, Volkswagen's commitment to corporate social responsibility was tested in several ways. The company faced ongoing criticism for its labor practices in emerging markets, particularly in countries with less stringent worker protections. Moreover, Volkswagen's reliance on coal-powered energy in some of its manufacturing plants remained a point of contention for environmental activists, even as the company sought to transition to renewable energy sources. Chapter 5. The Road Ahead. What Lies Beyond. As Volkswagen moves into the future, it is clear that the road ahead will not be without its challenges. The company faces increasing competition from both traditional automakers and new entrants like Tesla, which has set the pace in the EV market. Additionally, the automotive industry as a whole is undergoing a massive transformation, driven by advances in artificial intelligence, autonomous driving technology, and the rise of mobility. As a service, MaaS platforms. Volkswagen's ability to adapt to these changes will determine whether it remains a major player in the industry or falters in the face of disruption. The company's emphasis on electrification, autonomous vehicles, and digitalization positions it well for the future. However, its legacy, marked by scandal, deception, and unethical practices, may continue to hinder its efforts to fully reinvent itself. Ultimately, Volkswagen's journey reflects the broader challenges faced by corporations in the modern age: the need to balance growth with ethical responsibility, profit with sustainability, and innovation with transparency. The company's story is one of triumph and failure, redemption and scandal, a complex narrative that highlights both the potential and the pitfalls of corporate ambition.